Good morning. I want to welcome you on this beautiful day. Enjoy it because tomorrow, once again, winter will return. Spring by my calendar is next week. Spring by my backyard and my daffodils and my snowdrops is here, but somewhere else in the atmosphere doesn't get the message. At any rate, we are here. We're here this morning to hear how the Parkland event has had an effect on our high school students. But before we do that, we have a lot of people around this table this morning that represent various groups in the community, and rather than have each one of them introduce themselves, I know that a number of them, though, have some announcements they'd like to make that relate to the community. Where should we start? Anybody who has an announcement? Fran?
Yes, I just wanted to bring...
Stand up.
I want to bring to your attention two important election days that in our community. One is for the village of Larchmont today. You can vote at the village center behind the library. The poll is open until 9 o'clock. Your vote really counts a lot. And then we have the election for the 37th seat district in the New York State Senate, filling George Latimer's place. On the 24th of April. If there's the slightest chance that you are going to be out of town on the 24th of April, I have absentee ballot applications here, which you can fill out and mail in, and then you will receive your ballot. You could then mail that back to. And if you end up staying here on the 24th, you just they will ignore your ballot. You can go vote in person. But your vote is so important that we let our democratic values stand out. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Peggy Jackson from the League of Women Voters. Just want to let you know our annual luncheon is Friday, April the 13th. Our speaker is the esteemed George Latimer. So we'd like everyone to try and make it. We'd love your support. And it's the Orient Beach Club, 12:30 on the 13th. You can write a check at the door, just email. There's information on the League's website, Larchmont Mamaroneck League of Women Voters. Just Google it, you'll find the website. You can PayPal it, you can just sign up and write a check. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lori Friedley. I'm here on behalf of Mamaroneck Public Library, and I'm here to invite everybody to take a step back in time to 1968. That was 50 years ago this year, if everybody doesn't know. Some of us were not born then, but those of us who were, and those of us even who weren't, we're inviting to take a step back in time and learn a little bit about the 1968 was a most turbulent year in many ways. And so you will see I have placed flyers around the table. If you do not have one, please see me at the end of the meeting. The programming aspects of this month are wonderful. We start in April, we go through the end of April, and we've got music programs and dances and programs about Vietnam and more and more and more and more and more for adults and teens. So please join us at your libraries, Mamaroneck and Larchmont, I'm speaking for today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force has a very new initiative. On March 31st, Saturday, we are going to be partnering with the Open Door Medical Center in Mamaroneck to distribute at least 10,000 pounds of fresh produce to the community for anyone who shows up. These are needy families who can benefit from the healthy produce that we're going to be handing out. While we distribute this produce, representatives of Open Door will be there to engage the recipients of the food, to talk to them about good nutrition and other healthy ways to care for themselves and for their family. And as usual, the food pantry, the Hunger Task Force is always welcoming volunteers to help out on this. If you're interested, you know where to find me. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I know you'll all be distressed because of the size of this program that there will be no tidbits this morning. Cry as you will. So come next month and we'll have a continuation of our neighborhood and subdivision maps. And our former mayor will tell you where the heights and the knolls are in Mamaroneck, and they are the opposite side of the street. But a couple other things. I want to congratulate Mary Lee Berridge for the wonderful eulogy she gave at Bob Hayden's memorial service for his public service, mainly to this organization and to At Home on the Sound. She did a terrific job, Mary Lee. My next thing is that, of course, I have to do LMC-TV. Our local live show has been off the air because we moved our studio from Library Lane to the town center, our temporary studio there. But last week we had our first local live in about a month, and it was on this program. 3 Mamaroneck High School students and a Rhinex High School student, and our own Maura Carlin was a moderator and interviewer, and it's a wonderful program, so watch it. And we are blessed to have our studio manager here taking us, and so you can watch this program. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to turn the program over to Tammy Burke.
Good morning and welcome. Is this working? Okay. Yeah? Okay. I'm the Reverend Tammy Burks, the Associate Rector at St. Thomas Mamaroneck, and I was part of a wonderful subcommittee that put this program together very, very quickly. And I'd like to start by thanking my co-committee members, Mary Lee Berridge and Janet DeMasi, who co-chaired the committee, Theo Saul, Shirley Hilton, Peggy Jackson, and Ann Butowski. They all deserve a round of applause for getting us all together here. So, as we all know, on the afternoon of February 14th, a gunman entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, killing 17 students and teachers. The ripples of this tragedy have been felt across the nation as communities have joined together to express their fear, anxiety, courage, and fervent desire for change. The students in Parkland, Florida have been center stage in the national conversation in speaking up, expressing what they're feeling and experiencing. And when the summit board met last month, it was not long after that event had occurred. And there was another topic on the docket, but our discussions started to turn to the fact that our own students were organizing. They were organizing walkouts. They were organizing a community rally. I think within like 24 hours, the Facebook page had 1,000 community members signing on saying, we're interested. We want to know what you're experiencing. We want to know what you're hearing. And so we felt strongly that this was although it was a national issue, which our board tends to be hyper-local, there was a real local effect that was being felt. And so we wanted to open this forum to discuss this. And we decided that what we really wanted to hear about was what the effects of all of this were having on our students. You guys were standing up, taking a lead, and so we wanted to hear that. We wanted to hear from other community members what they were seeing and hearing and experiencing. And so we're pleased to have with us the panel this morning. And I'm going to briefly introduce them right now and then give them each a chance to speak. We have 3 students from Mamaroneck High School. We have Amanda Robinson, a freshman, Quinn Flewitt, a senior, and Eddie Cam, a sophomore. So we're happy to have them with us this morning. And they have all been actively involved in the rally, the walkout, speaking, and raising awareness. Then we have Dr. Alan Dienstag, I asked you and then I still got it wrong, who is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Larchmont and the director of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Community Counseling Center. Dr. Dienstag received his doctoral degree from Yeshiva University and did his clinical internship at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, New York State Psychiatric Institute. He joined the staff of the Counseling Center here in Larchmont Mamaroneck in 1990, and in 2009 he was appointed clinical director at the center. In this role, he supervises a staff of 10 professionals and develops programming in collaboration with the school district and other community agencies. So thank you for being here with us this morning. And finally, we have on our panel this morning Dr. Nora Mazzoni, who is currently the Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services in the Mamaroneck School District. Within her current position, she covers all services and programming which supports the academic and social-emotional health of students in grades K through 12. In addition, we have in our audience Carol Wolf of the Sandy Hook Promise, an organization whose intent from your website is to honor all victims of gun violence by providing programs and practices that protect children from gun violence. And we'll look forward to hearing from you at the end of the panel as well. All right? So I'd like to just begin by clarifying that this forum is really about listening and hearing the voices of our students and other community members about what they're feeling, experiencing, hearing, and seeing as a result of what's happening in the nation at large. It is not necessarily about coming up with solutions or challenging for solutions at this point. It's about listening. And it's definitely not a forum to discuss school security. We know that that is an important issue on people's minds. And we originally intended to have Dr. Schaps here to address some of those issues. Unfortunately, he was called away on an emergency, but he will be back at our April meeting to talk about school budget. And he said he is happy to address, have a portion of that be about that. But it's really not, this is not the forum to get into deep discussions about what are the schools or what is this happening, what's happening right now. This is really focusing on the students and what they're experiencing. So, before we begin and turn to the panelists, however, I'd like to introduce Annalee Ricci, who is a local community member and whose great niece is actually a student at Parkland in Florida at the high school, and who lost her best friend in the shooting. And we asked her great niece to write a letter to our community, to the students here, to express some of what she's experiencing, and we thought it would be a nice way to set the tone for what is happening here this morning. Annalise, thank you for being here.
I have two nieces, great nieces, that were at the school. They're twins. They were freshmen. One of them, I asked for a response of what it was like to live through that, and she wrote me this letter. I hope I get through it okay. You know, some people say, don't worry, it'll never happen to us. The odd thing is, I heard this 2 days before the shooting. We had just been discussing drills. Our school is required to have a false shooting drill at some point in the year to practice what we do in the real case. The sad thing is we never even got to practice one. I know I'm supposed to be sharing my reaction with you, but I think it's important for you to know what we went through before any thoughts or assumptions occurred. I was in Spanish class, somewhat near the building, but not too close. My friends and I were working on a small project which was due at the end of the period. I remember sometime around 2:30, the fire alarm went off, and I thought, well, this can't be right. We just had a fire drill this morning. Hundreds of kids ran out of the Spanish building. I didn't think much of the situation then, but I thought maybe the culinary class downstairs had burnt something or caused the alarm to go off. I remember sticking with my two friends. I'm the kind of friend who's very motherly. I watch out for everyone. I make sure everyone's okay. And during this drill, I made it my goal to stay with them the whole time. As I rushed down the stairs towards the entrance of the school, a man I'd never seen before grabbed me by the hands and pulled me in and screamed, "Run to the front, get under the seats, now." Then I felt my legs tremble, and I ran down the aisle, my friends right beside me, and I thought, where is Mackenzie? Mackenzie's her twin sister. Everyone got down. There were at least 75 or 100 of us, and at this point my mind was blank. I could hear people screaming outside. I immediately took out my phone after this and I texted my mother, "Mom, there's a shooter here." I guess that's how the brain works, making assumption before anything has even been confirmed. My attention quickly transitioned back to reality. Why on earth was I hearing helicopters and gunshots? I remember rocking myself back and forth, holding my knees to my chest, and singing to the soundtrack of The Greatest Showman. The moment I saw the SWAT team, the FBI, and the Coral Springs police, I went into absolute shock. They pointed a gun at each of us and asked us if we knew who Nicholas Cruz was. I hope no one ever has to know what it's like to have a gun pointed at you. That's when a panic attack started. But this was the worst one I'd ever had. I remember dragging myself along the floor and crawling to my Spanish teacher. My legs no longer seemed to work. We sat together and I cried, and I was running out of air. It felt like I was drowning. She kissed me on my forehead and she wiped my tears. She told me we would be okay. I didn't want to trust anyone. I'm sure anyone reading this may cry, but in the moment of an event like this, you can't cry at all. There's nothing. You're like a sponge trying to absorb everything in your surroundings. It's been almost 3 weeks since this horrific event. I woke up in the morning of February 15th to find out my best friend, Kara Logren, was killed the day before. I don't know where she was shot. I'm not ready to know. Another friend I've known since the 4th grade, Jamie Gutenberg, was shot in the back. From what I've heard, her spine was shattered. She would have been paralyzed her whole life, but she died. They never got to live their lives, never got their first boyfriend, never got to take an AP class, never got to graduate. I always told my mom I wanted Kara to be my roommate in college, and now that dream is crushed. I miss them. Martin Agrialo was in my geography class, Luke Hoyer was in my PE class, and Joaquin Oliver was a familiar face around the school. School is hard. It's hard to go back, and yet in some ways it's awesome. It's filled with so many emotions: happiness, sadness, nervousness, more emotions than I ever imagined. I've been on the news multiple times. The attention can be unbearable at times. Other times it makes me realize how much my country cares about us. I believe these 17 people died to make this country a better place. We are going to ban assault rifles. Although I support the Second Amendment, we do not need machine guns for mass murders. I'm going to participate in any marches I can. I will not stop fighting. And I hope anyone listening to this will help along in this fight. And please keep us in your prayers. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, and thank her for us from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you. All right, so now we would like to turn to our students and give them a chance to, I kind of told them that we were interested in hearing some about the discussion of the walkout, how it was organized, where it came from, what did it mean to you, what are you hearing from your fellow students, what are you personally, where do you see this kind of movement going, what's on your hearts, and what your experience has been with the community response and what you would like to see from the community. That's a lot, but so I will hand it over to Amanda, Quinn, and Eddie. I guess you have the mic there. That one? There it is. Yep.
I think the original. Oh, sorry. Hi, Quinn. I think that the original goal of the walkout, and I think that we did an okay job at least making this the big point of it, was to make something that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, so this one. Tab or no? Okay, you have to project. That's not actually projecting. No, you got to put that on because it's for LMC-TV.
All right. So,
There we go.
thank you, Dina.
She's got your back.
All right, so I think the original goal and intent of the walkout was to create something that any student could participate in regardless of their political beliefs, because there's a lot of discussion within student bodies about like, oh, I don't believe in taking away this, I believe in taking away this, and I don't think we want it to be about that. I think we want it to just be about the idea that we should all feel safe where we go to school. And we made a big effort in shutting out people in the Facebook group who were trying to make it into a partisan thing. Even though we all pretty much agreed on policies and everything, we want to make sure that anyone could be a part of it. Me and Eddie and Amanda's friend Jackson Bayer, who really started this whole effort, he immediately made an effort at the beginning to make sure that the Young Republicans Club was part of the walkout. Whether or not they participated, he made sure that they were a part of it, so that any kids who felt that they aligned more closely with the Young Republicans Club than his own Young Democrats Club could be a part of it. And that way it was a school-wide thing and not a partisan issue.
Hi, I'm Eddie. Well, I just wanted to say that when I started, joining this movement, I didn't know what it exactly was going to be like. I never have actually gotten politically active before, or active in in any type of field like this, and I got really nervous about it. But the thing that really inspired me personally was that it was run by us. Like, it was run by the kids. It's run by the kids nationally, and that was the thing that really inspired me. And you see these kids, and they'll go after the NRA. They'll go after companies that support the NRA, and I think that's just the bravest thing to do, because it's not run by adults. It's not run by corporations or organizations, and that's the whole point. The point is it's run by us, and because this is an actual problem that we're facing, and we want to change, and we're not going to rest until we get it. So thank you.
I just wanted to start off by saying that my cousin was actually in the Parkland shooting. And I just remember that I came home from school Wednesday, February 14th, and I actually just finished my basketball season after long days of being after school. So I got home and I just took a nap immediately. And I remember my parents actually coming downstairs and just waking me up and saying, "I don't want you to worry, Amanda, but the school shooting where your cousin goes to school." And I was just like, "What? You're kidding, right?" I just was in total shock. And I just remember not even responding to what my parents said and just turning on the news immediately and just sitting there for straight 5 hours, just following the news and making sure that I didn't text or contact my cousin, and I let her contact me first. And I just was in total shock, and I was terrified because I never got to say my last words that I wanted to say to her, and I didn't want that to be the last thing I ever said to her. I think was I miss you and I can't wait to see you soon, because I was seeing her in a week for my little cousin's bat mitzvah. And I was just so nervous, not really talking to anybody and just sitting and watching the news. And personally, I go to school every day kind of nervous, always saying to my parents, I love you so much, before I go off to school, because I don't really know when it could be my last day. But I think that we all are there for each other, all of these students, and with the whole walkout and the whole rallies and everything like that. I think it has made me think of much broader, that we are really there for each other no matter what happens. And that made me definitely feel more secure in schools. But just whenever we have a fire drill or anything like that, my heart kind of skips a beat. Or when the announcements come on, my heart skips a beat. And yeah, so it's been pretty scary.
All right, thank you. And now we've asked Dr. Dienstag to talk about the changes that he's seen with students that he might be in contact with or is in the community in general. Are there, how is this kind of being addressed from the counseling center perspective, and advice to parents, to teens, to communities?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first thing to notice is how much emotion gets stirred up when we talk about this. The fear, the sadness. I know I feel it listening the students speak. I feel it listening to that letter. You know, we could do an hour on just that letter in terms of how young people and people react to fear, what happens, how they cope, how we cope. But it's about emotion, fundamentally, and it's not just about students, it's about us and our children. We don't separate the parents and children in this regard. What we would do for children is what we need to do for ourselves, and what we do for ourselves has an impact on our children. So I want to just break a few things down so we can have some points of reference as we're talking about this. One question that comes up is what's the function of emotion? What's the evolutionary function of it? Because when you think about what the function of it is, you have a roadmap about how to deal with circumstances where there are overwhelming emotion. So just quickly, the function of emotion is threefold. One is it motivates behavior, right? When we have emotion, there's a behavioral response that typically comes with it, right? The other thing that it does is it communicates. It's a rapid response system for communicating something important to people around us, right? So when you think about a circumstance where a child is in danger or someone you know is in danger, if you approach that person with no emotion and try and get them to move, and try and get them, like oh, you better move, it's not right. That's right. But if you, quick, do something, right? The emotion communicates, right? And it gets people around us to do things, right? The other thing is it tells us, and as parents we know this, it tells us something's up. You know, sometimes you walk into your kid's room or your kid comes home from school or your spouse comes home and you kind of look at them and they don't say anything, but you have this sense something's up. Something's up. So emotion functions in this way. It motivates behavior, it communicates. And when we think about that, it's also possible to understand what can go wrong in a crisis situation, right? And how being exposed to crisis can make it harder for us to function in the world and think clearly, right? So one of the things to observe is that if I'm frightened and if I've been exposed to a really, really terrifying circumstance, which this was for everyone on some level, then my level of emotion is already elevated. And it doesn't go away on February 15th. So, for example, if there's an unexpected dismissal from school, right, and my emotional level is already up here, right, and then something adds to it, my thought process is not going to be the same as it would be if I was receiving that information in a calm place. I am in the rapid response system. And that rapid response system is great in an emergency. It's not so great if you need to reflect on what exactly is going on, what is the best thing to do. In order to behave that way, we actually have to train ourselves and do something that we wouldn't ordinarily do, right? And so it's important to think about that as we think about how we have all been, to a certain degree, traumatized indirectly, and for some of us, directly, right? Because that affects how we behave, how we think, and how we act. I want to say something about student activism. You can argue about whether it's a good idea for students to leave school buildings for 17 minutes, whether they'd be better off in class. You can argue about the policy questions and what the specifics are about banning this kind of weapon or that kind of weapon. But psychologically, there's no argument. Activism is healthy in a circumstance where you have been made to feel powerless. It is one of the primary things that you can do when you are exposed to a unpredictable circumstance that has overwhelmed you. And so when I see students engaging in activism, I want to say that they are doing something very powerful, not just to change the world, but to help themselves cope, right? Activism protects the individual, and it also makes a contribution to the larger sense of safety that's important to all of us. So I think that that's extremely important. It's also important to observe that there has been, over the last 4 or 5 years, an enormous increase in rates of depression among teenagers. It's a substantial spike that's taking place nationwide. Rates of depression, rates of suicidal ideation, and in fact suicide in teenagers has increased in very substantial ways over the last 4 or 5 years. And so again, to be active, to not perceive yourself as helpless, to not withdraw from challenges are things that go against the depressive sense that exists in the world, and it's something really, really important. So I think we need to support these efforts, we need to encourage these efforts. These are really healthy things that they are doing for their own well-being and for ours as well, and I think it's just great what you're doing. I provided a little bit of a handout here. We put this together at the counseling center because we thought there would be, so it's in front of you. I don't have enough for every single person, but it's the one that says the Parent Circle Community Counseling Center. And these are just some basic tips on how to prepare yourself for a crisis. So I want to just say something about stress that affects all of us. And that is, we forget that when we are exposed to a stressful circumstance that is ongoing, we need to actually do more than we've been doing. And many of us, myself included, have this instinct of actually doing less. So, if you have a family member who's ill, if you have a child who is going through something really difficult, and what your usual stress reduction routine is to, do yoga once a week or work out once a week, well, you actually need to increase the level of care that you're giving yourself in order just to stay right? But what most of us end up doing is we actually do less, right? So there's too much going on, I'm too busy, right? I can't do anything. So this is similar. If we are exposed to a frightening circumstance, whether it's at school or something else that's going on, we need to actually do more if we expect to be able to repair or cope in an effective way. And these are just some very simple things that can help you if you notice you are in a circumstance that is frightening to you on any level. So I want to just look at a few of these and go over them, and then we can talk about some of the other stuff. So we talked a little bit about the function of emotions. Let's just focus on breathing, which many of us forget to do. Right. So it would be a great thing if when we turn on the news and we see something like that, right, we have a practice which is to stop and breathe and to focus on our breathing, because everything flows from there, right? And if we skip over what we're actually feeling and what we're actually reacting to, our functioning is not going to be improved by that. So breathing is important, and I included a paced breathing, a little paced breathing exercise. This is really, really simple. The premise is just this, that you breathe in and that you breathe out for more counts than you breathe in. And everyone has a kind of comfort that they have. It might be 3 counts in and 5 out, or 4 and 6, or whatever it is. But the point is in and then out for 2 more counts. What you will notice, why don't we do it? Why don't we do it, okay? You don't have pancakes in your mouth. So find an in-breath, take an in-breath and count. And then for the out-breath, 2 more, whatever it is. So in and out, 2 more. Again. If you do this for a while, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your nervous system that is responsible for comfort, for sleep, for all of the kind of inhibiting aspects of our functioning. You can make yourself sleepy actually doing this. It's a simple skill. Yeah. Are you feeling tired? Yeah.
I was already tired.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something. On election night, I was dozing in front of the television because there was so much paced breathing going on that you might have come in and thought I'd lost consciousness completely. But it works. It works, and it's simple, and it's a way of taking care of ourselves. Okay. One other thing, labeling your feelings is extremely important. You know, one of the things that we do at the counseling centers, we talk about vulnerabilities and being transparent about your vulnerabilities. So what are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are the things that you don't want the pilot of your airplane to be experiencing, right? You don't want the pilot to be hungry. You don't want the pilot to be sleepy. You don't want the pilot to have just had a big fight with his or her wife or spouse, right? You don't want any of those things going on. These are vulnerabilities. If we know what our vulnerabilities are in any given moment, and we do this little exercise where we give everyone a name tag and say, well, this is your warning label. Put on the warning label what I would need to know about you right now, right? And the whole idea is you are labeling how you feel. And when you label how you feel, what you're doing is you're reducing your own emotional intensity, right? So if I got up here and I said, you know, I'm kind of worried about how this is going to go. I'm not really sure it's going to go so well. I'm not. This is too big a subject to really talk about. I'm never going to be able to. So if I did that, it actually works. Like I get more relaxed, right? I feel calmer. Well, we can all do that in every circumstance that we're in. And when our kids tell us that they're scared, they are doing that. And what's important to do is not to say it's okay if they say, I don't feel safe, I'm afraid, but rather to validate the feeling. Because what helps us feel calmer is when the feeling that we have is heard. If I tell you I'm scared and you tell me it's going to be okay, then the likelihood is that I'm going to have to say I'm scared in some other way, and maybe even in a louder way. Or maybe I'll feel less safe because I don't think that anyone really understands what's going on. I know what the instinct is. The instinct is to make it go away. We want it to go away. Validation is actually the better way to make it go away, right? The validation is the better way to make it manageable. Right? So we want to label our feelings, we want to label what's going on for us, we want to help them label what's going on for them, and even when it's uncomfortable, to find ways to validate what is really a clearly valid reaction to a dangerous circumstance. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Nora Mazzoni, who is going to talk a little bit about what the school district has in place, what you've been seeing from the spectrum from kindergarten through high school. We've kind of focused on the high school.
Good morning, everybody. Phew. I don't know that there's any good place to be in this order, but last is certainly not the preferred place. It's like, wow. First of all, I want to say to the students, thank you, you guys. You made a huge impact, not only just in Mamaroneck, but all over. And Ellen, I'm going to try to connect to some of the things that actually you've said and the students have said. I thought long and hard, and I really kind of grappled with Debbie saying, what can I bring to this table, right? What's the most important thing to share at a time where there is no denying it? It is a very anxiety-producing time where everybody, kids, adults, feel incredibly vulnerable with good reason, right? Not just because of what happened in Florida, but because of what's happened in movie theaters, malls, schools across our nation. And I agree with you, Alan. There's no one answer. And there's lots of reasons why there's no one answer, mostly because I think every one of us feels it differently. It depends on how self-aware we are, how well we can have what repertoire of coping strategies we have, the supports we have around us, and how reassuring they feel. And so it's a really complex kind of question. How do we make people feel safe in a society that, in truth, has lots of areas that have shown us it's not so safe? So, I thought one of the things I could do this morning was share with you what is in place in schools and what we are thinking about and what we're trying to adapt in order to respond to what most definitely is a true uptick or increase in anxiety among students, depression, incidents of self-harm, greater incidents of students requiring outside support, therapeutic programs, even partial hospitalizations. But we're working on it. And in student support services, many people had asked me when I came in and had a chance to chat, what is student support services? Well, it's everything that you can imagine that supports students when they start to experience an element of discomfort from, my schedule stinks, I got to go see my guidance counselor, I hate this teacher, to, wow, I've had a sadness in my family and I'm feeling like I really can't cope with this day. So psychologists, guidance counselors, social workers that work with families, special education teachers, physical therapists, occupational therapists, anything outside of just the regular day. So any type of support that kids need. And that staff, which encompasses approximately 100 people in our district, really collaborate vertically in buildings. What do we see happening in a particular school? Say if there has been a student who's dealing with a terminal illness, for example, how is that affecting kids in this school? In addition to going horizontally across the district, what are we seeing around Mamaroneck in light of Parkland? Our social workers, our psychologists, they've been coming together kind of in this kind of a forum saying, what are we seeing? What do we need to do? How can we be available to support families and students? And that work is ongoing, but it escalates when we have these moments where something's happened, of course. But the data is there to say we need to be ever vigilant. And I think the number one most important thing is that we take the time to know each other well, to know what our triggers are, who we are, so when things go amiss, somebody notices that we're off the mark, that we're struggling, because most of the time, most of us, if we're really struggling, we don't tell anybody right away. We just hold it here until it builds and builds and builds. And that's what the staff needs to be mindful of with the students, that we can't rely on you shouting out to us and saying, hey, I'm struggling, but when your teacher sees that you're not how you usually are in class, or your guidance counselor notices that you're coming in and you're checking in more often, which is different than before, that somebody stops and says, let's figure out what's going on. Like, things just aren't okay. It's not just about grades. So I think that is our number one focus is, does every student have somebody who knows them well? Do we know what's going on in families and what are they struggling with? And are we constantly outreaching and there for them? So if you were to ask our psychologists and our social workers what else they're noticing, they would say that students are coming by and they're talking about, or much more, that first of all, they're much more aware of the dangers of gun violence, but they're actively talking about it more. And that they are saying exactly what you represented. School doesn't feel so safe anymore. But the reality is, it's a bigger fear than that. Society doesn't feel so safe anymore, right? And that's a big thing to grapple with suddenly. So, what's the support staff doing? Well, we have just in the district in general, and I just wanted to make sure I shared some of this with you. Some of you might not know this already, but across the district we have 11 school psychologists, 5 social workers, and 13 guidance counselors. And I would say it's fair to say that they have an open door policy, right? You go in, somebody will see you. Even if your counselor's not available, somebody will make sure that you have somebody to talk to. The counselors also are constantly outreaching to the students. Even leaving, you'll walk down the high school hallway there and you'll see notes on an easel for students to pop in, just constantly checking in. But the counseling office and the psychologist's office, social work office, it's a revolving door. And that's a good thing, because it means that kids know that they don't have to wait for an appointment, that when the need is there, there's somebody, to turn to. But there's also really kind of programmatic and structural things in place that, that I want to stress. So all those personnel, especially the psychologists and the social workers, have both group sessions with students and individual sessions. So I'm going to use Eddie's example, but it's not a real example. If Eddie came by and he was struggling to kind of get resettled in school after these events, his guidance counselor might say, you know what, Eddie, why don't you come by each morning and let's just talk for a few minutes and get you settled in. Let's get you regulated. Another student might be, okay, we're going to pull a group of students together who have a similar concern and we'll work with them weekly. So there's some real structured supports in place. There are some students who, within special education, are mandated to come for counseling because we know that their social emotional needs are such that they're not going to come on their own, and we need to make sure that we are definitely watching them, monitoring them, and making sure that the services are there. There's a structure called the instructional support team, and that is where psychologists and teachers and administrators come together, and their focus is to make a plan to support a student. Lots of times it's academic concerns, but I think, Alan, you would agree that many times when a student's not doing well, that's the surface issue. But underneath it, it's much more complex, and there might be things going on that are resulting in that academic difficulty. But within those meetings, and another structure that's called 504 accommodation plans, what we're finding is that the majority of support plans that are put in place for students are based on anxiety. The bottom line is kids are anxious, and that manifests in a lot of different ways. Increased school avoidance. I don't want to go to school. It makes me anxious. Maybe nothing's even happened there, but I'm not feeling so good, so I'm going to tell mom and dad I want to stay home today. I don't feel good. Really more social isolation. In my free time, I'm going to kind of go off by myself, or I'm going to go home, whatever I'm going to do, but I'm not going to stay engaged with those around me. Social media can be a good thing, but it can also be a hard thing for kids as they read more and their feelings escalate. So we're really, we're seeing all that, and we're trying to say what can we continually refine to make kids know that we're there for them and that we want to know them well. We have done some real program adjustments. Some of you who've watched board meetings have heard me talk about our ESP program. That's our emotional support program. It's for a small group of students who have suffered severe anxiety manifesting in school avoidance. Kids who have been hospitalized because of it or not. Kids who are coming back from support programs. And we have a dedicated psychologist, a teacher, teacher assistants there. And what happens there in the emotional support program is what It's what you need when you need it. So if you get to school and today's a really bad day and you can't get to class, that's okay. We're going to deal with whatever it is right now that's getting in your way. And when you're ready, we'll support you and off you go. So some students might be there all day some days. Some students might go to all their classes. But the focus is on providing real-time therapeutic support within a school environment. Other things, our staff have been trained in what's known as DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and Alan could do this much more justice than I can. But broadly across the district, our psychologists, guidance counselors, and social workers are running these groups, and they're focused on mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation. As well as our whole staff in the department are trained in crisis prevention and intervention, which is all about how to help people de-escalate in escalated situations. So that's where we are, and our focus is just to do it and do it better and be there for the kids when they need us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do want to hear from Carol Wolf. I wanted to just pause for a second to see if there are some questions that we see a couple hands. So I'm going to ask for a couple questions and then get Carol to speak as well. Okay?
So I just wanted
Thank
to
you.
ask the students, there have obviously been lots of incredible shootings, and why do you feel this one has such traction among your age group?
I think a big part of it was they got whoever, I forget his name, I'm kind of glad I don't know his name, went to the wrong school at the wrong time, and the kids were very strong people. And also the fact that it's all teenagers. And I think that there was just a group of kids who were kind of spurred by everything politically going on now that felt like they were already in the mood of having to do something about what they disagreed with. And then this idiot comes in and shoots them. And they really stood up for themselves, and I think that was a big part of it. I know for myself that I've become a lot more politically active in the last few years. I started by volunteering with the Bernie Sanders campaign, and then for AP Gov, I volunteered with the George Latimer campaign. I think there's just a general air of activism for a lot of kids in my generation. I know with us three, we both wanted to get involved directly with this. I honestly didn't think that the walkout would work at first, and I remember the first thing I said about the walkout was posting to my friends, I don't think the walkout's going to work, but whatever. and then within 5 hours, I was an admin on the group. So, and I was completely anxious the whole time, and the whole time we were organizing it, I was always trying to be the voice of reason of we can't do this because if this doesn't work out, one, we'll look like idiots, two, it'll be a waste of our time. And I remember we spent all morning before the walkout. I had a free period. It was this type of day. I had a free period. We're lugging the big stage out onto the field, and I'm exhausted. My arm hurts because I just carried a stage with 3 other people. And I was standing on the baseball field, and I have hundreds of kids I know, kids I don't know, coming down to the baseball field all at once, and that was the most amazing feeling ever. And I don't care how many of them were just using it as a free period to skip class. And I had a lot of kids tell me, dude, thank you for the free period. The joke's on you, you came to my walkout. But they came, and that was a really great feeling. And I think that just kind of goes back to what I was saying about, our generation feels the need to do something. And I think because of, what we've been given with social media, we're very lucky that we have the ability to organize more easily than maybe your generation did. Maybe that helps us, but I think that's why it happened the way it did.
My question is really, I think it's really wonderful what the kids are doing, but I'm also wondering, the younger students, the middle school kids who maybe feel less of an ability of empowerment to take charge of things, but probably are just as, my guess is just as anxious or maybe more, I don't know. How are we helping them, and what is the difference in their reaction, if any?
To answer your question, my sister is in the middle school, and when I was talking about this at home about how I was going to write a speech and about the whole movement, my sister immediately wanted to do it. She wanted to get involved. She didn't know how because she she didn't know if the middle school was doing anything about it. So she wrote the speech, and she went to the principal, Dr. Weitzman, and she didn't think that he would allow it. But he like sat down with my sister and he said, "We're gonna do this. We're gonna have a walkout. You're gonna walk around the school for 17 minutes." And then I think they met back in the auditorium, and there were speeches given there. And my sister was, very emotional about that. And it was great to see, because that was another concern of mine when I was doing this. I was like, well, it's great that the high schoolers are doing this, and it's gonna be a great moment for us, but what about the other kids? Like, this affects them equally as much. So it was just great to see that, and so it's good to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd heard from parents of middle school students that it was a really moving and empowering thing for them. So thanks for encouraging your sister to do that. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Oh.
You were on LMC-TV last Thursday night, and you spoke about when you were 13, the feeling you had about Sandy Hook, that inspired, that affected you, and you wanted to do something ever since. And now we have Carol Wolf here, who is the the associate director for development of Sandy Hook. We're just so lucky that she could come. And she has a couple of points. We're just delighted. She came down from Purchase, where she lives. She made it. And we're delighted.
Thank you. Okay, I will. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Mary Lee, for inviting me. I live in Purchase, and my kids went to Harrison. My nieces all went to Mamaroneck, so I'm a local girl. And thank you all for having me today, and I'll make it brief. So first of all, I'm so impressed with what you guys are doing, and couldn't agree more. Just wanted to tell you a bit about Sandy Hook Promise. I've joined the organization 3 years ago. We're based up in Newtown, and Sandy Hook Promise is a national gun violence prevention organization. It was started by a few of the parents whose kids were killed in that tragedy 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago. And it's grown to be a significant national presence in the gun violence prevention space, if you will. At first, when it was formed, the founders thought, like most people, well, policy is the only answer. And so they marched up to Capitol Hill and they tried to get background checks passed, and that, famously and tragically failed. So they shifted their attention to building a grassroots movement around gun violence prevention and giving people, specifically actually students and teachers and parents, tools that they could use in their own schools and communities to take action so that they didn't feel hopeless and helpless, which is what most people feel on this issue. And so that's what we've done. We have 4 programs. The umbrella is called Know the Signs, and we offer them to schools all over the country. We're in now up 7,000 schools. We've trained close to 3 million students and teachers at schools and youth organizations all over the country in these 4 programs, and we offer them at no cost. We're a not-for-profit. We raise money to do that. From listening to you and to your school psychologist, is it Nora? Thank you. You guys are so, the support services in your school seem extraordinary, and you're lucky for that. Many schools don't have that at all. And so we offer programs to go in and teach the students mostly and the teachers how to do a couple of things. One is to, our main program is called Say Something, and it actually trains students to recognize the signs of someone who's at risk of hurting themselves or others, and to say something to a trusted adult. And that is, very relevant now. It's what happened in Parkland. It's what happens often, frankly, especially signs on social media. You may have seen our PSA, Evan, which went viral about a year or so ago. It's about that subject. We also have a program called Start with Hello, which is about social isolation and sort of getting kids to bring in kids who are isolated but don't want to be. And then we have 2 programs for adults, teachers, and other administrators in the school. One's called Signs of Suicide, and the other is Safety Assessment and Intervention, which is a lot of what you spoke about, Nora. And so, again, we offer these at no cost to the school because the founders, don't think that, cost should ever be a barrier to getting someone the help they need. So our organization is about early intervention, prevention, not about the gun. We're nonpartisan, and like the student said, we want people from both sides of the aisle to get on board. We have many responsible gun owners who are supporters. Our personal beliefs, as you said, might be different, but as an organization, our message is to build a grassroots movement to ultimately change policy, through getting people and communities involved and through your generation. And just lastly, we've seen a huge change since Parkland, and it's because the kids are leading the effort, and we are just really, it's changed dramatically in the month or so since that's happened. And I've been there for 3 years, so we're following your lead, and thank you for your leadership on that.
Good morning. What I hear, and I'm very encouraged with, and there's an old adage that an ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. And what our nation is involved with now is a lot of reactionary thing. We challenged you as students to become more proactive, to anticipate instead of react. But this is something that I encourage, that Q, you going off to school next year, to college? Where are you going to school? Savannah, down in Georgia, north, south, bro. Enjoy, okay? But this is what we ask you as students to do, is just become more proactive so that, as the young lady said, see things before they happen and don't react. Let's anticipate, okay? But I'm very proud of you. Continue with it.
Thank you, and thanks all of you guys. Just a personal thing, when I was walking down to Harbor Island last week, and before I got there, there was a loudspeaker that worked. And I heard the refrain of "The times they are a-changing" in the background. And I said, my God, what a great theme song for all of you. It takes me back to my youth. It was a really exciting day for me, and I was impressed at how articulate all of you were. How well you expressed I wish my students at Purchase could speak as clearly as some of you guys did. It was really impressive. But now we've watched the reaction set in at the level around the country, and it seems like they're cutting it down to the most minimal, or they're changing our attention. We're now focused on Stormy Daniels and all of that stuff. How have you as students reacted a week, 2 weeks later to what's gone on since you went out?
One of the responses that I did expect, but I obviously didn't wish to get, was like, "You did nothing," which I found kind of funny because the people who said that are usually also doing nothing. And it's my philosophy that if you do nothing together, you're doing something. And that was sort of my philosophy going into the walkout, was like, the worst thing that happens is that we all did nothing together, which will inherently mean something. And I disagree. I do think that we did something. I think that the reason we all did it was because we knew that in the end there's great results if you all come together and you all have one singular message and you all decide to like make a statement about that message. So I obviously don't want to hear that response, but I've gotten a lot better at responding to it. No, I know you weren't. I was just saying, like, one of the things I've heard is people saying that. I know you're being very encouraging. I have also gotten a lot of really great responses. Like, I've had a lot of people tell me that they thought that we all spoke really well. I've had a lot of people like comment on specific things, which is really nice to hear. Like, one of my biggest fears was going up and speaking and then having my speech suck. 2, my deliveries suck, or 3, have no one care. And everyone was very gracious and very kind to me, regardless of whether or not it did suck. So I was very glad of that. What else? I think that everyone's been pretty supportive overall. The school was amazing. I think earlier on people were giving Clan and some of the other people in the school system some flack for not giving us enough space when they honestly did everything they legally could to encourage us without encouraging us, because they're not legally allowed to. And me and Jackson and Eddie and Amanda were all, I think, aware of that from the start. And we all made a conscious effort during our meetings with the other members of the walkout committee to kind of shut down any critique where someone was like, oh, Clan's not doing this for us. We'd always kind of remind them, well, 1, she can't. 2, she's doing this, 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 and this. So, she's making sure we're safe. There were, policemen at the rally and the walkout keeping us safe the whole time. We made sure to all thank them before and after those events. And generally everyone in the town has been very supportive. I've had a lot of family support me. And I actually, one of the reasons I got involved with this is because my friend Violet from Pelham, she started this hashtag at their walkout, Me Next, which is her build off of the Me Too hashtag. She used it and it accidentally went viral overnight for 8 seconds. So we used that, and I thought that's another kind of way we were all supporting each other in this. We all kind of came together and shared our messages and worked together to spread our individual messages.
I was just commenting on another thing that is a repercussion of what the kids have been doing, is that this very meeting, in fact, had its impetus in our asking, what are our kids feeling? What are our kids doing? This walkout, what is this about? And we created this to give you a forum and to understand what you're going through, and I personally hope help carry it forward.
Can I just say something about? Yeah. I just want to say something about activism at this age that I think is important. And you see it in the critiques that you're seeing on television. People critiquing what the kids are doing and what they're saying. As parents, sometimes we forget that our children are a work in progress. And I tell parents all the time, right, that, don't be surprised if your half-baked bread doesn't taste good, right? It's half-baked, right? We need a period of mentorship. We need a period to give a speech that sucks. We need the adults around us to help us in that moment. We shouldn't expect this to be activism on the level of Martin Luther King, right? This is training for the future. These are our leaders in the future, but not necessarily today, all at once, right? And so I think just for all of you, so that you don't become discouraged, because people are going to look at you and expect the world to change tomorrow, that you understand that this is absolutely the right thing to do. This is absolutely inspiring, and you need to learn how to do that, and we need to help you learn how to do that, and we need to support your efforts with understanding and with wisdom and with compassion, and not create an artificial sense of expectation about what's going to happen here. And I think it's really important to sustain this. I think that was the question about how do you sustain it. Part of how you sustain it is you're in touch with reality and you have expectations that are realistic. And that's not to discourage any of it. It's just to be real about what we can accomplish and what we'd accomplish at different stages of life. So I want to just say that.
Thank you. This is for Dr. Mazzoni. I have a huge sense of frustration. Parkland High School, by all reports, was very well endowed. It had psychiatrists, it had social workers, it had a police force, it had, the county had social workers, and every single one of those systems failed miserably. Is there any discussion of that amongst the educators nationwide to look at what happened wrong? This never should have happened.
Okay. So I'm just going to answer that from the heart, basically. I think that I personally would not pull Parkland apart, except I will tell you this. I know that the job that our staff does, knowing kids, and it's hard for me to believe, and I'm just speaking from my own stance right now, that nobody knew that something was amiss there. And I will tell you that we do have wonderful resources. It isn't, well, do you want to speak to that? Well, you know.
Nora, talk about the safety of what Mamaroneck does and the prevention of it happening.
I can't hear.
Because it can happen anywhere.
It can happen.
Just address that part because they're going to put you in a corner.
I'd like you to repeat what you just said to me because I couldn't hear all of it because the.
Mamaroneck annually, 4 times a year, all 4 elementary schools, the middle school and the high school, have safety prevention. They're meeting with safety officers, people from all over who are consulting with what's happening. That might be an unfair question in regard to the fact that it can happen anywhere, anytime. Let's not just talk about the school. It happened in churches. It happened in the open arena in Las Vegas. It just happened. So in regard to that, I think the protest was about the control of guns and everything else. What all the safeguards that happen, Mamaroneck, it can easily happen. We have a closed campus. Every door is secured except for one thing. Every kid can egress very easily, and somebody can be waiting at one of those unmanned doors. Is it a liability to Mamaroneck to say that you didn't have somebody manned at every door? That young man entered the school in a way that he knew how to. They had all the safeguards, but it can happen anywhere.
And I would like to remind us that it's really not focused on security today.
I was not discussing the security of the school.
Right.
I was talking about the identification of a particular student. And that for all the resources that the school had, it failed. And
Right.
I was just wondering whether there was a conversation on a national level amongst the school districts.
Right.
An examination of what happened and what did not happen, given all the resources that that wonderful school had.
Sure.
For that child's mental health.
Sure.
For that child's mental
Can I
health.
say?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
So, you see the emotion, right, in the room. Okay. So, and the emotion is obviously well placed. So, I'm a parent, and let's talk about the vulnerability of being a parent. Let's talk about the reality that when you have a child, you know that any day, every day that you live on this earth, the most important thing to you can be lost and taken away from you. It's a very vulnerable position to be in. We don't generally want to face the truth. The truth is that we cannot protect them perfectly. It's just not possible. I'm not saying there's no reason to do anything about gun violence. I'm not saying there's no reason to make sure that the school is secure and that's safe. I'm talking psychologically and emotionally. The hardest thing about this is to face the fact that something can happen, and it can happen anywhere. We can reduce the risks. We can try to manage ourselves. But the reality is that I am vulnerable, you are vulnerable, we are all vulnerable. It's very frightening. And when we get that scared, it's hard to think clearly and it's hard to talk about this stuff. We can't skip over that step. So let's just, I think, as I said before, label it first, and then you can have a better conversation. I'm scared to death that where my children are, there could be someone like Nicholas Cruz who got lots of mental health attention, who people knew about, but who got his hands on a gun and did something that was tragic and horrifying. We have to accept that there is no single policy solution that is going to make all of our children safe and is going to make it impossible for something like this to happen. That's reality. That's life. And I think that that's an important thing to kind of emphasize.
Just to go back and just to answer your question, I will, and then I'll hand over. I do think that superintendents all over the nation are dialoguing on this topic, and Dr. Shapp certainly is more involved than many of the superintendents. And so I don't think I can do your question justice, quite honestly, except to agree with Keith. You know, anything can happen any place, but I do believe that we're on it in terms of trying to do everything we can at every minute to be vigilant. So, but I will take your comment and question back as well.
I feel like it's more anecdotal, but I feel like I have something that may or may not answer the question, and if it doesn't, then please let me know so I can get back on track. But I think it's not always easy to tell where someone is mentally, and I know this just because when I was 12, my last town when I lived in Mount Vernon, my best friend Patrick's older brother DJ committed suicide out of the blue. He just jumped off of the Brooklyn Bridge. None of us knew he would do it, and none of us knew he had anything going on. Like, even his family, like, they were the closest family ever. They had no idea. His father used to coach me in baseball. He was like a second dad to me. Like, he was a very, like, caring man. His mom was the same. Patrick was the same. DJ was, like, very loving to everyone. He wasn't, like, closed off. And then you have someone like, was it Nicholas Cruz, who was very closed off, and in the town, in the school's defense, he was not in the school system. Second steps, he's a 19-year-old, so he's outside the school system. There was law enforcement lapses, but I think regardless, the idea is that you can't see someone inside someone's head all the time. You can't prevent what they're thinking. So you need to do what you can to prevent what they can do with their thinking. And that's why we have, you don't have psychologists in place of the TSA at airports. You have the TSA, because the psychologists can look at this like guy all they want, but they have no idea that there's a bomb in his underwear. They have a TSA scanning him to see that there's a bomb in his underwear. And I think that I don't know if that answers your question a little, but I feel like it's the idea that you can't always prevent everything mentally, so you have to do what you can to help someone mentally, but also prevent them from doing anything that harms themselves or harms others. And I think that, I know in Mamaroneck that everyone's doing a very good job of that. Obviously, there's going to be cases everywhere where it doesn't work out well, because not everyone is the same. There's not a protocol for every single person because everyone thinks differently. But I know, as someone who's like had counseling from the school, not nearly on the level that someone like Nicholas Cruz would need, I know that the school's like always there for students, and I know that if the school would not be, that there would always be individual teachers who would be, and that the school would be in full support of them. So I personally feel safe in that regard to my school.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm going to look to Elaine, but we should be wrapping up, correct? All right, so I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I would like to invite you to our board meeting or our next forum on April 17th, which will be on school budgets. And from whatever the superintendent wants to talk about. And it's from Mamaroneck and Rhinebeck. That's what I was saying. Both superintendents will be here with us for...
Yes. I just want to say our April meeting always is on the schools. We invite the superintendents of both Mamaroneck and Rhinebeck to come and discuss with the community what's on their mind. Does it affect the budget? Of course, because the very next month or weeks, month, is the vote on the school budget. But it's important for the community to know what the issues are top of mind of our superintendents, so that we're aware of what's going on in the schools. Many of us no longer have children in the schools, but we are paying for them. And so it's important for all of us to know what those issues are. And we give this month, April, our monthly meeting in April anyway, an opportunity for those who head those school systems to share their concerns, their successes, and so forth with the community, so we're better informed.
I just want to say, if anybody has My name is Rena Beater, and I'm a board trustee for the Mamaroneck Board of Education. If anybody has any questions between now and April 17th, when Dr. Shaps comes, you could always reach us at board@mamkschools.org. So.
Oh, okay. Sorry, George, did you want to say something too? Okay.
I just wanted to compliment the students for their composure in this very difficult time. I think that's probably the most important thing to me. There are some of us in the room that are decision makers in different levels of positions, and what we try to get out of it is what do we do about it as we leave here. That wasn't part of the conversation per se, but it's what we're all thinking, town council members, county legislators, and all of us. I do want to say just one general thing, and as I think probably the overarching message to me is how do we handle fear? How do we handle the fact that there are unknown things that can happen? Because it was a school in Florida, but it was also a nightclub in Florida, and it was a church in Texas, and it was going to a concert in front of a hotel in Nevada. And we are as vulnerable in this room as any student in any classroom is. And whether you're a young person or an older person, that fear factor is there. The thing I'm most worried about is that there are voices in the society that want us to muscle up on guns and muscle up on security so that your fear will be allayed if on every street corner there's somebody official with a gun. And that's one step towards something that happened back in the 1930s. It gave you security, and then it turned the state of Germany into a monstrous state. So I think we have to figure out how to handle the fear, and whether you're 16 or 17 or 18 or 64 like me, we just have to deal with it and have some optimism that we'll do the best we can, given the fact that things will happen and it's out of our hands completely. And that's where faith kicks in.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, committee. Thank you, panelists. You were all outstanding, and I think it gave the community a lot to think about, understand, and hopefully as a community we can continue to carry that torch that you've ignited and bring it into some action locally and hopefully nationally as well. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see you next month.